when the line would extend out to M222 or Grand and Monroe, and then extend both ways on Grand and Monroe, kind of putting a traffic snarl on the city. There's never been a big push, I would say, from city council to say prohibit them from doing that. It comes in spurts. I know previously there was a couple council members that were not happy with it, but those council members aren't on this board anymore. They wanted me to shut them down, and I would just respond, well, like through text messages, like, okay, but I need the whole council, because this has been a past practice with that organization.
The owner of On the Grid had
James?
told me that there are people that don't come down there on Thursdays. And I know for a fact that he's hurting from the construction and all this. We all are. And it just doesn't make sense that we shut that parking lot down, to me.
I mean, I appreciate what they're doing. I like the service that they're providing, but yeah, it seems to me that them shutting off the entire parking lot doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, they would have to continue with their drive-through delivery and pickup, they have to shut down that whole parking lot, or the logistics doesn't work for their operation. Fully understand and appreciate the impact it has on the grid and their operation.
Does anybody have another option for them? Can we think of anything else that we could offer them?
Yeah, three years ago, we discussed with them about finding a new location for these distribution days. County Fairgrounds, we listed as an idea, churches. It's really the storage of goods that they receive, and they receive those goods, days, if not, a week or so in advance. Storage of goods, some of the stuff is frozen, if I recall correctly, and it was just, we talked about like the Baptist church on M40. Because they work with the Baptist church, because that's a big parcel. It's on a main trunk line. They have a long driveway. They have a big parking lot. And our conversations with them was, there's really no feasible option outside what they have right now, just because of logistics of storing of goods.
And I would say it's probably a bigger hinder to On the Grid now with the construction. I agree with that.
Yeah, I would say I did not hear from local businesses in the past. There was 2 council members who were
Yeah.
just, sure, this had to affect other stuff, but I don't recall hearing from downtown businesses during the COVID years. And by COVID years, I mean, 2020, 2021. I'm not trying to make a statement here, sorry.
So I guess we understand it could be an issue, but exactly. I'm like Roger, I appreciate what they're doing, and a lot of people use them, so.
Is there any, in talking with the On the Grid folks, did they have, why can't they just do X, Y, or Z? Did they have any suggestions on how to do it differently?
No, he's just trying to make ends meet.
Yeah.
He works down there every day himself. And he's behind what he was, about 50 grand right now.
Wow.
So to shut down the parking lot that he utilizes,
Right, when so much else is already shut down around him. Yeah. I don't know, that's,
He's not the only business that's down. There are all kinds of them down. Is there anything that the city can do to help these businesses?
So I would recommend, before we segue into that conversation about just the impacts on the businesses, that we wrap up the conversation on the parking lots. I mean, am I hearing from a majority of council, you want us to enforce that the city owns that lot and they can't, close it during food distribution days? Or am I hearing that the current practice is still okay?
I have not been down here on a Thursday. Is it still lined up like it has been? I mean,
Yeah, please.
like it has been?
So we just recently had correspondence with Community Action Agency. They put this distribution service, this Thursday event on pause for the last 4 months because of the construction. It is resuming next week, this week, excuse me, yeah, this Thursday. It will restart for the first time since construction began. So they have, we've made some special arrangements with the contractor to be able to allow through traffic to enter off of Water Street and exit onto Hubbard Street left, and then exit again back onto Water Street. So that will resume this week.
Okay, so then the 50,000 he is behind has nothing to do in the last 4 months with Community Action having their Thursdays.
That could be inferred, and I think what Councilmember Zeter was saying was that was because of the construction, that
Okay, the construction, not necessarily just Thursdays.
that's kind of how I interpret it. Is that correct, Council?
That is.
Okay.
Okay, all right, that makes sense, yes. And like Bill said, they are not the only business in town that's hurting because of construction, unfortunately.
So did the conversation come up because they knew that it was gonna start again and they were concerned that it's just one more thing?
It's been going.
Yeah. So the food distribution is the 26th, but I've been down there a couple times where I've seen them have cones and spaces
Yeah.
for probably delivering. When I've talked to them in the past about the issue, you know, the food distribution that occurs on site is one. The other one is the home delivery services they have through the Allegan County Senior Services, I believe it is another issue. Since I've been talking with Lisa Evans, you know, we're talking about, you know, a new location for them outside the core downtown and possibly outside the city limits, just when they look at all their needs. If you've had your ear to, you know, the county board meetings and stuff, you've probably heard these kind of rumblings of, you know they need to grow. I mean, they are in an old IGA grocery store that has been, you know, put together and taken apart and put together, and it really does not meet the needs that, you know, they provide, you know, the services they provide to their customers and clients. So I know they have closed off, you know, through putting orange cones in some parking spaces, you know, recently. I've seen that with my eyes.
Yeah, I've been down there 3 different times, and somebody is at the gate saying, "Are you here for food?" And so I responded this last time as yes.
On the grid.
Yeah.
And so she let me go in, but then they came over and wanted to have words with me. So,
Parker and I can go talk to them tomorrow when we do our rounds. I know, like, we stopped in, we've talked to James a couple times too during this process. We've talked to most business owners during the construction process, but we'll go talk to Community Action and, you know, see if we can find a simple, you know, a more, you know, useful way for people to do the pickups. I mean, we do have other parking lots that adjoin their lot. That's not the only public parking one. There's also the triangle one that used to be behind the old city hall.
When do we expect that section of Hubbard to open up?
We have been told that that section of Brady and East Hubbard will not be open to vehicular traffic until all concrete work is done in those areas. That is the best information that we have.
Okay, thanks for bringing that up, though, Mike. It is a discussion that I know we've had since I've been on council, so. And thanks, Joel and Parker, for handling that conversation at least.
Yeah, as that conversation continues and as the downtown continues to develop some, I mean, we have issues with their step van that takes up 2 parking spaces. We have issues with what I'm gonna call, you know, Norwood's Auto Service, but it's the old bumpers, you know, Myers bumper to bumper thing. They have what I'm gonna call an abandoned vehicle with 2 boat bumpers on the front that they use. You know, they park that in a city parking lot space, and they use that to push in and pull out cars. So there's still some ironing out of some parking regulations that we need to, you know, wrap our head around. But right now, during the summer of us just ripping up, you know, the streets downtown and throwing everything into kind of a whirlwind. We have taken our eyes off that stuff.
Dave, did you have something else?
No,
Oh, okay,
thanks.
all right. Is there anything else for roundtable? Okay. We'll go on to the next item, which is discussion regarding water and sewer readiness to serve charges. Is Doug gonna
All
take?
right,
Okay.
yeah, so I'm gonna invite Doug up to the podium to answer any questions that council may have. I'll do a quick kickoff. At your previous meeting, which would have been the last meeting in August, so August 26th or 25th? 28th, thank you, Michaela. It came up in a discussion, I believe, at the regular meeting, a motion was made. And so, at that time, I think I agreed or I offered to put it on the study session for some discussion here at City Council at this level. So with that, Doug, do you want to go over how we handle ready to serve water and sewer fees?
So when committee was meeting, one of the contentious points was RTS fees. How it affected all lots, and then when it was charged on sprinkler only, or irrigation only accounts. And we felt that for the sprinkler accounts, the irrigation accounts, they're already paying one RTS for their main service, they shouldn't be for a second one. So that was removed, and then, basically amongst the WUSC members, there was questions, well, what about this type of lot? What about that type of lot? A vacant lot? A lot that had a house that was removed for whatever reason? Should they ever be paying RTS fees? It was brought up, RTS fees primarily are to pay expenses for that utility that are there, whether you make water or treat sewage or not. So debt payments, basic O&M. If the plant did not produce one drop of water, what bills would you still have? Probably some person there just to maintain it, some electric bills. That's what RTS fees are meant to do, to, provide consistent revenue for the base fees that are needed to keep that utility there. If RTS is removed from a property, that revenue goes down. A previous council member, I remember her comment was, well, whether it's there or whether it's not, in either circumstance, it's pretty much for eternity. So if a lot that had a house and the house was removed and is sold to the neighbor, and the RTS removed, you just lost that RTS fee for the rest of eternity, basically. So, that drastically affects the revenue to pay for the base fees for that utility. So, WUSC committee, we sat down, identified these 5 ways that RTS should be or should not be applied, and that's what was drafted and council approved at that point. So I guess, is there any other questions, clarifications?
Discussion council wants to have amongst yourselves.
Was this just to put it in front of us again? Okay, okay.
How many RTS empty lots are there?
I
Where
would have to
there's
check
nothing
with
on
our billing clerk. She was not in today to run a report on that.
I didn't run it on empty lots, I just did how many were active shut-offs and vacant. Empty lots.
We'll run the report tomorrow. We can email that to council.
Have we always continued charging RTS after we've shut off water?
Yes, I looked up the previous municipal policy, which contained the water policy in it, and that one was much more vague, but it was specific that RTS charges were to be charged on any lot that received water or sewer, and that just because it was turned off for a period of time did not relieve the RTS fees. The only way to relieve an RTS fee was to do a permanent disconnect. So that was in the previous policy, and that was brought forward in the current policy.
And at that point, it was also charged on each meter, correct?
Yes, so whether it was a domestic meter for the house or for a business, and also an irrigation meter, also received a RTS fee.
When we made the change to remove RTS from some lots, some meters, did we do a new rate study at that time?
We looked at what revenue, the only ones that it was removed from was the irrigation meters. And we looked at how many there was, and I want to say there was around 48, 50 irrigation meters, Tracy? All right. I mean, it's been a couple years, but we looked at that and what the charges were. And we figured that, we didn't feel it was right to the residents to charge them 2 RTSs just because they wanted to, have an irrigation meter so they didn't pay sewage on that meter.
And the other thing that played a factor in that too, if I recall, Doug, was that we took away the summer
Discount, right. So it was kind of an
So that
offset.
kind of, yeah,
So summer discount, all residents no longer got a discount on their sewage bill over the summertime. But then the residents that did have irrigation meters, they still pay for usage, but they don't pay an RTS fee on that meter. So, and I would add also that the irrigation meters, when installed, the resident does purchase that from the city. So it's not a free meter that they're getting. So that is purchased from them, from the city.
And at this time, RTS isn't tied directly to OM&R. I mean, there's not a study saying, okay, this is our RTS fee.
So when
piece.
every year when we go through the rate-making program, that assigns RTS to debt first and then O&M. I believe what Tracy sent out couple weeks ago, gave a breakdown of what the RTS was paying for in debt for each utility, and then if there was money left over, carried over to O&M. I believe both of them pretty much, it barely covers debt if it covers all of the debt.
I can tell you right now, for water, we bring in $540,000 in revenue, and our bond payments are $691,000 and some change. For sewer, Ready to Serve brings in $583,000, and for bond payments, it's $962,000. So we're not covering even the bond payments but that's where, Doug, I know we had talked about how even the rate increases we have aren't covering
Right.
all the things that we have to build up our.
I'll just say, before Joel, we had an interim city manager. He actually looked at it, at the rates, and at that point, he adjusted the RTS up and the commodity down, because his feeling was that, RTS should cover debt. We kind of said, well, there's no way RTS is gonna cover all of our debt, especially on the sewer side, without charging the residents, an exorbitant amount. So there was a compromise there. RTS was raised a little bit, commodity was lowered. But, as a financial advisor to tell you, RTS should be used to cover debt, should be set to cover all debt.
How many people have their water shut off right now? You said you looked that up.
What I heard was the list that we had last week was like 32 people were on the shut-off notice. Currently, I believe there's only either 3 or 4 that are still shut off, that did not either set up payment arrangements or make a payment to get their water turned back on.
But that's different than, the shut-off list is different than the ones who are actively shut off, like, for one reason or another. We have 34 active shut-offs and 9 active vacant properties.
34 active shut-offs?
There's 34 actively shut off, so they're getting billed and they're shut off. And then there's 9 that are vacant, active, so those are the ones that are being charged ready to serve only.
Right,
I
and there's
just
no
don't know
one-
which ones are, don't have houses on them, so.
So
It's like 2% of our bills that are shut off or that, basically, the list I ran today were the ones who have no usage at all, but are being charged ready to serve.
Of those 34, do you know how much of those are rentals? And if they are rentals, does it go back to the landlord?
Yeah, I mean, it would get back to the landlord if the rentals or renters
So if they don't pay it, then it goes back to the landlord. We put it on their taxes if they don't take care of it.
Correct.
That's what I was thinking of. Thank you.
Yep.
Where we had to do demolition.
Sure.
And the tax sale was not enough to cover the costs.
So Doug, I had reached out just to see if this was kind of an industry standard
Sure.
to charge RTS
Yep.
if there is no active water commodity being
Yep.
received. And you had kind of responded that, yes, that isn't something that's,
Each community has a little different
yeah. So
nuances with it.
I had reached out to some of our neighboring communities, Otsego, Plainwell, Holland, then the Kalamazoo Lake Association that services Douglas and Saugatuck, just to kind of see what they did in their communities. And the majority do charge a fee, whether there's water being sent to the residents or not. Otsego, it was just a minimum charge, and that's who I spoke with. She said, yeah, there's a minimum charge. She didn't really understand my RTS language. But when I spoke with Saugatuck or that lake, Kalamazoo Lake.
Kalamazoo Lake Authority.
Yeah, they do that too. They have what they call a base fee, but they actually have a sewer debt fee that they add on to everybody too. So for me, I feel like this is something that we need to continue doing. I'd be happy to entertain a discussion on maybe communicating that RTS, like from the city to the property owners, like, okay, you've had a shut off, however you understand you're still gonna be charged this ready to serve fee monthly. I don't know if that already goes out.
What changed when this policy was adopted in '21? When there is a house fire or something on that nature, typically it's Danielle that I've heard most of the time. Occasionally Sean will, inform the owner, if you plan on rebuilding, depending on your time frame, it's probably cheaper to pay RTS fees until you rebuild. If you don't plan on rebuilding, it might be in your best interest to pay the disconnect fee and just be done with it. So, yeah, the owners are advised, of the different city policies and different directions they can go, if they're not planning on using water for a period of time.
Okay, do you know if, like in the instance of Mr. Jones, when he purchased that property through the county, did he just receive a bill, or is there anything that goes out to new property owners? Tracy,
No,
do
not
you
to
know?
my knowledge. It is
A
on
bill
the,
goes out.
Okay.
well, it is on the owner to contact the city to, hey, I just purchased this property as, need the water turned on.
But if
And
they don't
Mr.
turn it
Jones's
on, it's
case,
still-
because he didn't need the water because he's renovating, a little bit different scenario there, but should still be notifying, the city that I'm the person on this
Purchased it.
account now.
Yeah, so
And when
like I
they
said, I
don't-
would be happy, like, if there's a way to communicate that a little bit better, so that situation with Mr. Jones could be avoided in the future. Do we get a notice when someone purchases a property?
So normally what happens is, we don't sometimes get the information from the county right away that, a transfer has happened. And then when Danielle goes to look at all of the things, that need to be pushed over to taxes before we send out bills in July, usually 3 months before that, she's sending out reminders that your water bill is past due, or your mowing is past due, or whatever, and then, she gives them a chance to pay before the date that we have to add them to taxes. During that process, she compares to the assessing program, because a lot of times that'll be updated in there, and then she gets the information on there, and then that's, in the case of Mr. Jones, that's what happened. She noticed that it was a new owner and everything. She put it in the name, or in his name, and just started billing as of the date that she discovered it, not the date he actually purchased it. But those are kind of rare where, I mean, there's not a ton of that come back on tax sale. But I do agree we could, I'll talk to Danielle about sending out, you know, if she's putting it, you know, without a resident or property owner contacting us, to just send a letter.
Yeah, or with a copy of the policy or the ordinance, you know, just so they have that information ahead of time, or at the same time they're getting that bill that kind of explains why, rather than just getting a bill. And I think that was, and I understand Mr. Jones is very upset, and I can understand in some respects that if you weren't expecting that, didn't get the water, didn't know that that was gonna happen, that would be frustrating. So I don't know if that's something council would
Yeah,
like to see.
Before I was on council, I had no idea what Ready to Serve was. I didn't know what that you paid regardless of whether you had your water turned on or not. So to educate people, I think it's just, is fair. I also had one other quick question about, Tracy, what you were just talking about with Danielle. Is that standard practice where she saw, oh, this has a new property owner, and just to put it into the new property owner's name? That's just how we do it, right? That wasn't something out of the ordinary.
No, that's what we've done ever since I started working here, so I assume it was done long before that as well.
So when somebody purchases a property, the water is automatically in their name. They don't have to call and have it switched over or anything.
Right.
I'm still kind of concerned about the 34 houses that have their water shut off. Is it that when they get on a payment plan, their water gets turned back on?
So, yeah, I mean, Danielle will work with them for the city that they get on a payment plan. And then, yes, they'll get turned back on, whether they make a lump sum payment or set up payments over time.
Policy seemed to imply that you had to be clear on your account before the water would get turned back on. But is it that they get on the payment plan?
Yes,
And then they get the water back?
City Hall is a little bit more lenient than what the policy makes it out to be. So it goes to what the current bill is, what's past due, for a lump sum, or if it's a payment plan, if you owe $1,000, you pay $1,000 or $100 today, and you say, I'll pay $100 more than my bill for the next 10 months and get that $1,000 paid off, then you can get turned back on. As long as, it's not $1 a month to pay off a large bill, as long as it's a reasonable, payment plan, time-wise and monetary-wise, then, Danielle would approve it for payment and turn back on for the service.
And just so we're clear, Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but section 1.2, turn off for non-payment, the city shall have the right to discontinue service. We have the right to do it. It doesn't say the city will do this. I mean, there are times I've made the decision on a Friday afternoon, we're not turning someone's water off because a weekend was happening.
We don't do turn-offs on,
I saw that in
Fridays.
the
Yeah,
policy.
we've made the determination before, based on the weather outside, not to turn water off. So I just want to be clear, people might be using the phrasing that, City Hall isn't as clear as this, but that shall have the right, it gives us the right to do it, doesn't mean we will do it. And then if you talk to other cities, there are a handful of cities that don't do water shutoffs. And every May, they take all the unpaid water bills and they put it on the taxes. There are some cities that have made that decision that they are not going to turn off someone's water access, which is becoming more and more common as I talk to other city managers.
And part of what I struggle with here is charging somebody for readiness to serve and denying them that water access. That doesn't seem right.
Are you considering this a fee or a tax?
Me?
It's a fee.
It's a fee.
This is not a tax.
So a fee you could opt out of, a tax you cannot. And you cannot get rid of this.
You can have your service disconnected to get rid of it.
And that price has gone up, hasn't it?
Yes.
What was it, like $750 when it started? And-
Yeah, so somewhere around there, and it's now, it's 2,500 for water, 2,500 for sewer.
That's a
That was,
lot.
that was put about by the WESC committee. A council member that is no longer on council wanted it higher than that. And for saying that, RTS, if you disconnect, primarily if it becomes a vacant lot, we're never gonna get that back again. So, yeah, the RTS on the water side may be $18 a month, but that's forever that we're no longer gonna receive $18 a month. So, by charging 2,500, it kind of makes up for a couple years of that RTS that are missed on that.
I saw in the policy that new connections need to be tied to some, like, building index or something like that.
So that would be is tied to an engineering index. Basically, it's the cost of putting that water main in the ground in front of that property. That's standard practice for any connections, new connections. So if a lot never had water before, you will pay a connection fee and a tap fee. Connection fee is buying into the system, is, paying a portion of the water system because you have never been on the water system before. A tap fee is what it costs to actually physically tap the water service into the pipe, into the water main or sewer main.
So is the connection fee on the tap fee, because the policy made it sound like there's a connection fee and that's set by that engineering index.
Yes, so basically, what our connection fees are currently right now, $7,500 for water and $5,000 for sewer. What was used was how much it cost to put water main and sewer main in the ground during the neighborhood projects up in Russell Robinson. And that was $75 a foot for water and $50 a foot for sewer. The policy, the fee schedule is based on 100 foot of road frontage minimum. If it's a corner lot, it's 100 foot on one street, 100 foot on the other street. If a lot is wider than 100 feet, then they're supposed to be charged additional $50 or $75 per foot of road frontage for the entire width of that lot.
So it's not tied to the engineering index, it's tied to what we paid at the time of
It's the same thing. When the fees are set, I tied it to what our current prices were for doing it. It should actually be, we should get a price from a contractor, from an engineer, what does it cost this year to put pipe in the ground? Because, prices aren't going down. I have not asked our engineer or, a contractor, what would it cost to put pipe in the ground the last couple of years since that project was done.
But the disconnect fee is not tied to the actual cost of the
No.
work or the cost of the
No.
service.
Disconnect fees are set to recoup some of the lost RTS fees. And then on top of the disconnect, there would be time and material for a water utility operator to go out, physically dig down to the service and disconnect it from the main. And if that includes, just ground repair, this is gonna be less, but if it involves cutting the roadway out and getting down to the service to disconnect it from the main and the roadway, that account would also be billed for road repair on top of the $2,500 disconnect.
I'm still stuck on, I don't see how I can justify charging somebody for access to water and then denying them access to that water. That's just where I'm at. And I'm a little, I'm kind of listening to what's going on with these fees and wondering if we need a new rate study that helps us understand what our long-term costs are and takes into account what our current customer base is and our usage rates. I don't think we can just keep that same spreadsheet and keep punching in numbers. Like, I know a lot goes into a rate study.
I'll just throw out there, with the DWAM grant we received from Eagle this past year, part of that is doing finishing our lead service inventory. The other part will be looking at financials for the water system. That does not deal with the sewer side, but at the water side. So our engineers will be hiring a financial consultant to come in and look at it and look at, rate structures and make sure we're still on track with our asset management.
And I think that we've discussed as well during our budget session, actually having a more in-depth conversation, going over the spreadsheets with council, more than just the West Committee, because it seems like it keeps coming up, even though everybody's reviewed it, approved it. It's just, there's so many different ways to calculate. I mean, like, when the interim city manager was here, you can increase ready to serve or increase the commodity. There's multiple ways to do it, and there are a lot of communities who charge, maybe the point is we don't call it ready to serve if your issue is we're not ready to serve them. Call it something else besides ready to serve. It's just the base fee, and it's there for a purpose. You take it away at any level, we're gonna have to increase commodity or something else. I mean,
And just like when I contacted the Kalamazoo Lake Authority and I was saying ready to serve, he's like, I'm not quite sure what that is, but it sounds like
Yes.
it's our base.
I have heard that,
Right.
they charge a
So
other
it's a
base fee or
rate,
so.
yeah,
but-
it's their base fee, but then they have a separate sewer charge, a sewer debt service charge
Mm-hmm.
too, on top of the base for water, so just,
So that
yes,
would kind of
calling
be
it
like
something
our,
different maybe.
that may be the answer. Mhm. But, the other
it doesn't
thing
change what it is.
No, exactly. And the other thing is, I would have to say, these fees are included in the budget. We look at them every year, and ever since I've been here, by the time we get to fees, everybody's so burnt out, nobody has any comments about fees, is what it seems like to me.
And I had
So
mentioned to
maybe
Joel
that is
after
a-
our strategic planning, having a separate session before we get into, here's our budget, here's the numbers, so we can't change anything. Having one meeting that's just about that.
Just about fees and look at,
That's a good idea, Tracy, I like that.
It is difficult looking at the tables of fees. And, you look at it and you go, well, that all seems fine. And then we get into actual human situations and then you go, oh, okay, I didn't really see how this is gonna affect. So it does open discussion and, it creates some discussion, so it's good as we progress through this year and come into our next budgeting year, looking at what we really want to see happen and what we want for our residents. And I think I would be open to a discussion on water's a human right and that we don't do water shutoffs, but I don't think we're going to have that conversation today.
no, but I do agree that maybe that is something we need to do. Either at a strategic planning meeting or one where we can make a decision and have that discussion. So. Is there anything else on this that anybody would like to say? ask any questions for Doug or anything? Well, Doug, I appreciate your time you've spent on all of this for the last 4 years that I know of, so.
Thank you, and I'll just say, I mean, that's part of my job is to know it and to answer questions, so,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Next on the agenda is the presentation of the Allegan City Dam Removal 100% Design Report.
All right, so I'm going to kick this off. We do have Doug Codsman in the audience. If council has more questions than what we have in our report here. I'll go back to January 13th, 2020. City Council adopted a resolution to support the full removal of the Allegan City Dam and Allegan City Powerhouse and installation of expanded green space. That's generally shown in the Allegan Dam feasibility and conceptual design report if the funding for removal and installation of the project does not place a burden on the city's finances, and if the final design influenced by the public is agreeable to city council. Since that time, council, you appointed a riverfront design committee. They've kind of served as the sounding board for staff, for the consultants, and for the public through this process. We were successful in securing a $360,000 EPA grant to help pay for construction drawings for the removal of the Allegan City Dam and the Allegan City Powerhouse, as well as better define the expanded green space. That project, that work is completed. It came in a little under $360,000 when it was all said and done. I think the total was like $340 something, so we saved about $12,000 when this was done. In your packet, you did have links to the final dam removal report, the final dam removal plans, and the dam removal technical specifications. This report and plans and technical specs have been shared with the EPA, the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, otherwise known as EGLE, and the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, the DNR. Staff's going to continue to be engaged with those three entities as the Superfund process plays out along the Kalamazoo River. We're also going to keep the Riverfront Design Committee engaged, probably meeting every 4 to 6 months, just to make them aware of where we are. The one thing I wanted to highlight through this process, because the engineering work is done, the plan work is done, but I want to let you guys know where the final estimated cost landed. This is just for the spillway removal, which is the dam, the powerhouse demolition, the Mill District Road construction and head race fill, and the channel restoration through the spillway only. This is not the restoration, the length of the river up through the impoundment. This is just where the spillway was. So to remove the dam, you're looking at roughly $4.6 million. To remove the powerhouse, the Mill District Road construction and the head race fill, you're looking at $1.7 million. And then the channel restoration through the spillway is $529,000. Our total estimate right now is $6.9 million. Coupled with this is the Eagle does a dam inspection every couple years, every 2 years. They have recently completed that report. They submitted it to us late last week. Staff is going through that report. Once that report is completed, we'll be forwarding that on to EPA through their Superfund process, so they have a full understanding of the condition of our current dam. We haven't had time for us to really dive into what that report is or its recommendations, but if there's new information in that process, we can share it with you. Any questions? I mean, this was just it was a straightforward grant from the EPA to, saying, hey, if the dam's gonna come out eventually, you're gonna have to have construction drawings, so let's get that taken care of. So in a way, we're kind of checking the boxes off as we move to a decision.
Have we had any recommendations on previous reports for the powerhouse?
Doug, come up to the podium if you don't mind.
Such as, the only one I'm aware of in the last 3 years is a report done by Abbenmarsh in 2022.
Well, it's inspected every 2 years, right?
Pardon me?
It's inspected every 2 years, the dam?
The dam on a
Yeah.
triennial, every 3 years.
Yeah, sorry about that. I said every two. I misspoke. It's every 3 years when the dam
Right.
inspection happens.
Yeah, Eagle came in 2020, did an inspection and a report, and I believe I forwarded that out to y'all last year. They just come in, I don't know, a month ago, and like the city manager said, we just got the report late last week.
Did those past reports say anything about the powerhouse condition and recommendations for what we need to do with it?
It's been a while since I looked at them. I believe it did address them. I don't know to what extent.
Okay.
I mean, they're all available if you're interested.
Yeah, I think, if you could send that again, I'd appreciate it. I remember the report and I remember reading the section on the powerhouse and going, yeah, that sounds like it needs some work. So I was curious if Eagle agreed that it needed work.
I mean, if Eagle did agree, they didn't agree to the extent that the fines began. I mean, that's how the state agencies work, is when they give you, when they do their inspections on whether it's the bridge or a dam or a road, and you don't address them, they then follow up with, punitive, actions, which is typically fines. But we can forward those, previous dam reports to all of council, is what we'll do.
I appreciate this being on the agenda because I raised some concerns about it. In my mind, we've got three options. We can either take the dam out, the powerhouse out in a controlled manner. We can secure it and get it up to the point where it's insurable again and the recommendations are met by the engineers, or we can just wait to see what happens. I'm not in favor of number three, but if we do go that route of waiting to see what happens, I think we should really be shoring up our emergency management plan and probably looking into at a minimum what it takes to get that building insurable.
How long ago was that building uninsurable?
That I don't know off the top of my head. I'm making a note to look into that, Mike, if you wonder what I'm doing right now.
Okay.
Any more?
It seems like the date originally, when we first started talking about this 4 years ago, they were looking at 2025 or 2026, and now we're pushed way past that for any work actually being done here. Am I correct in thinking that?
Are you talking about having the dam removed?
Yeah, like that when work is actually gonna start here. I mean, we're a ways out still. I mean, my thinking, the reason I asked the question is because initially it was like, well, we don't really have to do anything because it's gonna get taken out, but now it's not really. I mean, that is getting pushed further and further out, and so dilapidated buildings are going to continue to deteriorate. And when do we need to make a decision on, okay, we actually have to do something because it's not going to get taken out in a timely fashion?
Are we at the mercy of somebody saying they have the money and this could happen? I mean, they could decide to do it at any moment?
So one of the mercies is the record of decision by the EPA and administrative law judges. When they determine what the cost is, and if this gets rolled in or included into a record of decision that this dam must come out. And then we will know, where the chips fall at that time. Addressing the powerhouse, Middle District Road, and the hedge race fill. When Joe Leverance was looking at trying to shore up that building and convert it, to some kind of hotel, and he just wanted to put a sheet piling into it. If I recall correctly, Eagle told him, it's a dam. You can't do this unless you do all of this work.
Yeah.
And so I take that to read all of the work, meaning that second line item. So you're looking at, 1.7 million
Yeah.
and some change is what I'm taking into it. And that's a conversation we can have with, Eagle. Are we allowed to just, structurally remove the four walls there? I mean, the dam goes further below,
Yeah.
that floor. I mean, I think it's like 17 feet above the Kalamazoo River. The finished floor level of the powerhouse is 17 feet above the Kalamazoo River on the backside, on that bend between the powerhouse and the water treatment plant. So that's a question we can ask Eagle and see, where they, what they tell the city. And then we can get a better estimate, just to remove that structure without having to deal with, the embankments, the abutments, and all the other myths that go into making a dam happen.
And want to know more, can we just put a sheet pile in front of the powerhouse, so if it was to fail, and then we could take out the building structure and demolish the building structure, but know that it's secure from the water racing downstream?
Right.
Or that first, if we need to address it that way with them, to say, we just
Yeah.
want to make sure we're not going to have an issue.
Yeah.
When we were out there, it must have been must have been late last fall, when AECOM was doing this work at that time, one of their engineers said, and I'll take this in jest, they go, well, the dam is beneath the water level. He goes, if that roof caves in, you probably just strengthened the dam is what you really did. Because more debris, and they sent, and they go, you're not, they did not see a failure happening within, the actual dam in the water.
You said that was Eagle?
No, that was one of the engineers from AECOM. And again, we're out there on site.
Right.
There was no calculations. I used the words, probably said it in jest. I want to be clear on that.
What I heard from the engineers here was, we don't know what happens when that building collapses. We know the building's gonna collapse, because it's blighted. I mean, there are trees growing out of the roof right now. There's a hole on the whole back of the roof. So we know it's gonna collapse. We don't know what happens, because that whole area underneath that powerhouse building, you can't get into it. We know there's water running through it because you can hear it. But that was what I heard from the engineers, and that's kind of a scary situation.
Doug, does
I would-
Eagle, I'm
If I
sorry, go
might, I
ahead.
recall something, and correct me if I'm wrong, because Joel and I had a conversation more than once. I recall, I forget what report it was in, but the roof was more than likely gonna fail. But I also recall him saying that, maybe it's the same conversation, that don't expect the roof to fail to cause the concrete to blow out. A dam removal.
That could be what I heard from the engineers, we just don't know. That was what a presentation we received here at council. I wasn't on site with you guys. You may have heard different speculations about that.
When it comes to engineers and their PE license, they're always going to tell you, I don't know, without actually going through and doing a full study, because they're liable if they say, I for sure can tell you this because that affects their licensure and everything else. So I'm not as afraid of the building collapse, but I still want to see that waterway secured. And, if Eagle and the Superfund want to say, we can put in a sheet pile as per our plan here, because the plan calls for one extending from Parago's sheet pile wall right across, something to that when I was looking at the plan, so that then they can de-water. It's like, can we just start with the first steps of that, and then that at least, then we can look at demolishing the building and work in a budget to try to demolish the building half, and you can leave the cement works till later, but.
Does Eagle, if you were to call Eagle, would they come out and look at this and give us some ideas?
They just did with the inspection a few weeks ago, about a month ago.
Okay, okay.
I
And
just
they-
glanced at the report. It does address the powerhouse, the raceway, and the dam itself, and all four sections of the dam. I just haven't had a chance to go through it and really look at it.
Is that what you just said? Sorry.
I'll get there.
Okay, all right. So maybe if we could look at that report and then revisit this again?
Yeah.
Good with that? Okay.
We'll go ahead and we'll send you the 2020 report and the 2023 report, so you have the most two recent
we can
reports.
compare.
So you can see what the changes were between their inspections, or 2023, yeah.
2017 also, or not?
If you have access to 20, yeah, we can get access through Eagle. I was able to find 2020 pretty quick on my computer. That's the only one I could find.
Yeah.
And Roger, just to go back to what you were saying about that timeline, when they were just here earlier this year to do that presentation, I think it was the planning process, like we wanted to get all of these plans forward so that they could make the determination at EPA and then go to the PRPs, those potential responsible parties, to see what they would be able to fund or what they're going to be required to fund. But I think I had always thought it was at least like 10 years out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be
It'll be a while.
a long while. Because we're way down the list on the river, because they had jumped ahead for Trowbridge Dam, so they're still like back in Otsego and stuff by the list.
Okay, if there's nothing else on this, thank you, Doug. Next on the agenda is the review of the August downtown infrastructure and streetscape project update report. Joel, you gonna take this? Parker?
Yeah, I got it real quick. This is on the, typically scheduled for your first meeting. However, your first meeting of the month was canceled. So this comes on to this month's meeting. What you see in the column, the left column on the screen right there is work that was done in the previous month. So this probably goes back to August. Yeah. Work. Yeah, August, and maybe some September was then included in there as well. And then what's on the right-hand side is work that's going to be coming up in the upcoming month, which is really September, and then some in October. I will say that the contractors, so Milbacher has mentioned multiple times to me, their plan is to do pavement in October. They do not want to pave in November, because then they're pushing it too close. So that is their pavement, to get that top layer on, Brady and the east end of Hubbard, and then the base layer and the top layer on the west end of Hubbard, including Locust. So we meet with them every Tuesday afternoon at 1:30, city staff and Milbacher and a couple of their subs and Abedmarsh, and we kind of go over everything. And yeah, any questions regarding the report that was in your packet?
Seems like our concrete contractor seems to be slowing things down. At least that's the perception of watching daily. Is there anything we can do to speed that up, or they're just
Yeah, so
prolonged?
I would say there's a handful of subs on this project. The concrete contractor, is performing, adequately. One of the issues we're running into is that they are very busy this time of the year. And their concrete contractor is, I believe, the only MWBE on the job site, which is a minority women business enterprise. Since there is some state funding in this, there are certain requirements for the funding. One is MBWBE. And so we are working with that contractor. The other thing is they're a big contractor, so they like to pour a lot of cement at one time. So when we say, hey, we got, this 10 foot by 10 foot, section we need poured, they're just like, we cannot make, So I would say, in the end, things are working, adequately there. Probably not to the speed that I wish it would be happening, but it's the speed that the project is happening.
I do have a question. Did we make a change over here in front of Tantric from what it was originally?
Yeah, we made a change. The design plans that we got at the very beginning, we're not going to have the FAR building, so that's 245 Hubbard, have their doors at the sidewalk grade. From the beginning, one of the goals of this project was to have doorways at the sidewalk grade throughout the project, so we can remove as many stairs as possible. That didn't get incorporated. And we were in the field, noticed this could be an issue. We had the bump out, so we had the room to meet the ADA requirements for a sidewalk path. And so we just had to go back to the drawing board and do some design so we can get the doors at, the 4 doors at the, or that, the 2 doors at the end of 245 Hubbard, level with the sidewalk. At 245 Hubbard, you have 4 doors. The 2 end doors go up to second floor apartments. So if you have to make a step there, you have to make, 30 steps after that to get to the second floor. But those 2 middle ones are retail spaces. One's an office right now, one's a yoga studio. Those we wanted to make sure were flush. So, those uses and the secondary uses over years would be, accessible for people.
Okay, so I'm just gonna ask a question that was asked to me.
Sure.
This was not done for a particular business,
No, it was not.
changed
Not a
after
chance. Correct.
the original had been
Nope,
drawn.
was not even, nope, it was not.
Okay,
It was noticing in the field that we had 2 retail stores that were gonna have steps, and we knew we could make it work without steps.
so we had to raise the sidewalk.
Yeah,
Oh, we did?
more or less. Yep. So you have a couple seating walls that have been installed in there that are gonna be nice for people to sit on. You're gonna have also a raised ramp further further east on Hubbard in front of Tibbetts Financial, because they have a place with a step that you have to get into. So we worked with them. You have one right next to it that we could not address. We have steps going down to the lower level. Councilmember Hans's old building, so that is gonna have steps going down. So yeah, we made that. We talked to Sherwood's Cove, Butch Sherwood and Becky Weaver. That was gonna require a ramp to be installed, that they would have to participate in the cost. And they said, yeah, we're good with what we have. And then the corner building at Brady and Hubbard, 142 Brady, the triangle building, that has multiple steps, but since it's not occupied right now, we didn't want to decide where a ramp was gonna go. And so that one is still gonna have steps. However, I'm sure when someone purchases it to develop it, they are gonna work to make sure we can get a ramp in there, and we left room to get a ramp in that area as well.
Speaking of that area, Joel, there's some concrete, it's been written on and stuff already. Are they gonna do any work to those? I mean, there's names and.
Sure,
those are
so
etched in them
we've had a
already.
couple incidents of what I'm just gonna call vandalism as part of this project. Most recently, we had a mini excavator, not broken into because it was unlocked, but gotten into, and then the key was misplaced. We had a porta potty or porta john that was tipped over as part of this, and then people wrote their names most recently, not in the area you're talking about, but another area. We were able, working with video cameras that are on the back of Sassy Olive, we're able to capture, because that alley is lit, the images of the 3 individuals running through that area at that time. The police department did what the police department does. They had the conversation with the identified individuals, and we're going to be pressing charges for, not miscellaneous, but malicious destruction of property. The areas where the concrete occurred. So you have some scrapes, you have some light footprints, you have some scratches. Our plan of action on those, talking to the engineers and the contractors, is that isn't at the top level of the curing. And over time, that's gonna weather off and be plowed off through sidewalk plowing. So that stuff will be removed. We're not going to have the concrete contractor rip those small sections out. One of the concerns is, again, the concrete, work so far, our goal is to have this site button up and presentable, before winter gets here with concrete and asphalt for sure. When they do Locust Street, Parker has already offered many times, we are gonna be standing out there on watch. We can't have the contractors out there the whole time. The minute they turn their back, people just appear. There's a amazing YouTube video, I think it's in England, of someone who steps in concrete, steps back off the sidewalk, walks 2 feet, steps back into fresh concrete, falls over in it. People walk out of the storefront not realizing that, it's freshly poured concrete, or they think it looks dry, and you get that little indentation on the curing. So, Parker and I are gonna be hanging out there when we do this. I'm really nervous, I shouldn't say concerned, but really nervous about Locust Street, our main retail block. I hope that, looks wonderful. We haven't accepted all the concrete work yet, so we haven't signed off on stuff, which is something we have to do. If council is uncomfortable, my council, as you know, when you work with me, I mean, council as a whole, if there are areas where you're just like, man, this just isn't appropriate, you're allowed to, share that concern with me. And then I share it with our Doug Hodsman, DPW director, and then we talk to our Milbacher as well. I would say I didn't notice anything on the most recent pours, because we kind of shared our frustration with Milbacher that, hey, they need to stay here and keep their eyes on this stuff. So.
I don't think we should hold the contractor liable for vandalism. I mean, I don't think they should have to redo it at no charge for vandalism in our city
So-
after they pour it.
They should have insurance for that.
Yeah, so part of the contract is they're responsible for the concrete until it is completely hardened and ready to cured to be turned over to us. So
That
I hear what you're
contract is
saying.
with
I fall in the
Milbacher.
same-
That contract is with Milbacher?
that contractor is with Milbacher. They hired a subcontractor.
So the Milbacher's has that contract, is
Yeah.
what you're saying?
Yep, Milbacher, yeah. We have a general contractor, it's Milbacher. Everybody else is a sub to Milbacher.
Okay.
So that's where we fall with that.
Okay.
I've been curious, what's the structure outside the Hartman Ellis building?
So the Hartman Ellis building is a landscaping seating wall. So what you're gonna see in there are trees and bushes and flowers. Landscaping seating wall. So the face, so right now it's just concrete. So the face is gonna be stone block, and then the top is gonna be limestone cap for people to sit on. Similar to what we have next to the splash pad, same design.
Okay, thank you.
And you'll see a similar one that's gonna go up at Trowbridge, hopefully next week. There will be the Trowbridge Plaza between Minnie's and Dewey's property. Which, how awesome is that building looking? I cannot believe, when they said they're taking off the pebble facade, I'm just like, best of luck. I had horrible visions of brick coming, but no, the Deweys and the Kugelars, the general contractors, have done a great job on restoring that building. I keep telling Dan Dewey, it's a passion project. He uses a different phrase, but I'm like, nope, it's a passion project. When it's all said and done, you'll be well-liked in this community, I'm sure.
Is there a seating wall going in at the other end, down on the tantric end?
So in Tantric, yeah, there'll be
There's
two,
a seating
there'll be
wall.
two small seating walls in that general area in front of 245 Hubbard.
So
So
not as big as the Hartman Ellis end?
not as big, but you can see down there, there's a gaping hole right now in
Yeah, I
front of
saw 'em digging over
245.
there, and I thought,
Because
oh,
they
what's
just gotta
that
get the
now?
foundations in for these walls, It's not something you just place on top of the concrete, you gotta dig deep.
Yeah, okay, good.
We could save room for riverfront signage.
Yes, we could.
All right. Next on the agenda is review of the July and August revenue and expenditure reports. Tracy, you gonna take that, or Joel?
Yeah.
Or I guess any
Yeah,
questions?
this is just a report we submitted, if you guys have questions.
If there's any questions?
And one reason it's in the packet, so if you do have questions, you can also always email, set up meetings with Tracy to go over stuff.
So if there's no questions, we'll go on down to review of council agenda. Is there any questions or any changes to the agenda? No.
So real quick, there's no changes, but I do want to make you aware that Joe Leverance informed me he will be coming to speak during the public comment period. This was just this afternoon, he reached out to me. If you recall, a month or so ago, he was I don't want to say encouraged, but said, yeah, you're going to look at Pingree Park or Pingree Park, and figure out if you can do some kind of resort there. He's getting all positive reviews at the state level. So he'd like to approach council and ask council for first rights of refusal, or whatever we were calling that, agreement where, we will only negotiate with him, similar to what we did with 102 Brady or 101 Brady, and what we did with him on the dam house, or the dam structure, powerhouse structure, sorry about that, the powerhouse structure, a few months ago. So he's really excited. Things are looking positive. I still hold my same recommendation, as long as the city isn't financially, liable to something there, we're committed, we can go with the direction of council. We'll always go with the direction of council. My recommendation is make sure we don't spend money on that project, especially when we have other needs, like we discussed earlier.
If there's nothing else for discussion, everybody all set? I will adjourn this meeting until 7 PM.